we're on this like cycle where we kind of fall in line with the World Cup and presidential elections and the Summer Olympics and the Winter Olympics. We always aim to like make it just like 2 or 3 years, and then it ends up being 4.
Life gets in the way at a certain point?
Yeah. I mean, you gotta wait till the songs are ready. You know, you can't pick them before they're ripe. And then there's always this moment where we deliver the album and we're so excited, and they're like, great, we'll release it in 8 months. And, you know, like I could release this tomorrow. I could just put it on the internet and then it would be done. It would be released, but that's really not how it works. We're still on record labels and they still like lots of setup time.
I mean, you were talking about sort of like, you know, the dwindling of the dinosaurs before. I mean, it does seem like things are eventually heading in that direction.
Yeah. I don't know if we're stuck in some kind of record label mode. Even the fact that we just put out albums of like 10 songs or whatever feels outdated. It's just weird for us to think of it any other way because that's what we grew up with. That's what we've always done. But maybe in the future, if we write a great song, we'll just be like, oh man, we got to record this and release it. And maybe that'll happen. And maybe we'll move to modern times.
Do you think that's just how you're wired at this point to understand music in the form of an album?
Yeah, I'm definitely wired that way. It also is such that when we get together and choose a producer and choose a studio, we're going to like, you know, record all the good songs that we have. So it just comes in natural batches like that anyway. Yeah, it's not how some people do it. They like keep content flowing to their bases. And we're open to whatever. We just hope the next batch of songs is also very inspired. That's the main thing.
It's like any other job from the standpoint of like you have to start approaching it like a job at a certain point. And when it makes the shift from being something fun that you're doing in your spare time to being not only yourself but children and family members that you're supporting with it, you do have to take it more seriously.
Yeah, I mean, even when we were right out of college and driving around in a van, we took it extremely seriously. You know, now with kids, you have to find a way to like be home half the year and balance your touring and creativity and income and how your spouse feels. So there's a lot more factors and it's different. But we've always kind of been business minded and, you know, when it's come to writing music, we just kind of leave it all out on the floor, and that's just been our operation. You know, every live show feels like it's super important to us, whether there's 2,000 people there or 200 people there.
I wonder if that's helpful too, thinking about things in terms of album cycles and really sort of separating those things out, you know, making sure that you have your personal life and your work life and keeping the two of them apart. That probably does keep it exciting when it comes time to like either get in the studio and record or, you know, get in the bus and tour.
Yeah, we all have kids in our band, so we get on.
Not actually in the bands, but all the band members have kids.
All the band members have kids.
You haven't done a Partridge Family thing yet?
We have done that, and we should talk about that as well. Not recommended. Yeah, we're all going through the same thing. We're parents and we're traveling musicians, and we all strike the balance. But there is a moment when we get on that bus with each other where more than ever, we're like, thank God we have this. This is more valuable to us than ever, because tomorrow I'm going to sleep past 6 a.m. Or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll wake up at 6 a.m. and I'll just have some hours to myself. It's like very valuable time for us as individuals and, you know, as a band that likes to feel the rewards of what we do. You know, being on the road, you have people clapping for you and telling you they like your songs and that you're good at your instrument. And it's really important to have that in my life, you know.
Do you feel like there are elements that you need to introduce in order to keep that level of excitement going, or is it just...
Yeah, it doesn't just happen naturally forever. You know, people ask us a lot about our longevity, which is, you know, striking, and maybe a lot of people wouldn't have expected it from us. But for us, we've always felt like we had something to prove, and the trajectory of our music is pretty exciting. And it's exciting because every time we get in the room, we want to reinvent ourselves. We want to make a classic album while also like uncovering new ground. And I don't know where exactly that comes from, but it will be no different next time. There's nobody that's just going through the motions of writing. There's like a serious drive to prove ourselves. and it happens every time. And our fans, for the most part, come with us. So, yeah, we're very fortunate to be like, creatively engaged, in a process that's, we think getting more and more exciting.
Something approved is an interesting way to put it. It almost sounds like you had a chip on your shoulder or something at some point, as though there was some source of doubt.
Yeah. I chip on the shoulder might be a strong way of putting it, but Guster has seen a lot of our opening bands go on to great fame and fortune and Grammys, while we've had a nice steady course and a loyal fan base and have made a decent living. It's not a chip on my shoulder about it, because I can see the difference between their music and ours, and I know where we had our opportunities and where we may have done this right or that wrong. But I think when you're in your 40s, it makes sense to reflect on that stuff and be grateful. That's where my head is now. And, having a drive and having something to prove is really useful, because the other version of that is to be complacent. And we've seen it in a lot of our peers, to be honest, and a lot of people who achieved a degree of fame and whose new music doesn't move me. That seems to be the norm. And so another thing to be grateful about is that I feel like we're in a different place.
Obviously, there's no one recipe for popular success, but it does seem like there are a few things that you can kind of point to.
I mean, with us, we had a career that involved a moment where we almost rebuked our early sound. And so we all learned new instruments. And when we first picked up the new instruments, we weren't very good at them. So I was playing a drum set in front of large audiences who, A, didn't want me to be playing that drum set. B, were watching me struggle on it.
That's almost like a combative approach, right?
It was hard. The feedback was always like, go back to the bongos. But, we felt a different musical kind of energy behind it, and we were excited by that. And, as writers and creators and artists, you have to just go where you're excited. So that's what we did. And, I feel like on this last album, we actually like broke through a wall of, now there's all these new possibilities in front of us. So yeah, I say the word vector and the word trajectory a lot. I need like a third word that means the same thing that I can throw in so I'm not repeating myself as much. Arc.
It's like this idea of like parallel universes, right? Like every decision that you make opens up an entirely different path.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like that. And, if we ever stumble upon the same idea in writing, it's like, oh, this kind of sounds like something we've done before. It's rejected, and we move on to the next thing. Or we reinvent it entirely and maybe keep the melody or an aspect of the groove or whatever, but there's no repeating ourselves.
Were you stuck in a rut at the time and you felt like you need to do something drastic?
Well, the time was right around the millennium. We had just released Lost and Gone Forever, which was, people consider our seminal album, where we actually achieved an album with just guitars and hand drums and voices, for the most part. After struggling on our first two albums to capture a certain sound, Steve Lillywhite helped us really capture it, and things started happening for us, and we felt very satisfied. And then we got in the room to write new music, and nobody wanted to do it again. So we burnt down that temple, and we picked up keyboards and bass and drum set, and we spent a long time learning them and struggling on them and writing songs that felt very different. But Keep It Together, which is a transitional album that came out in 2003, is also a lot of people's favorite Guster record. So maybe not right at the moment it was released when it was shocking to people, but
yeah.
In hindsight, people like it.
This is something I think about quite a bit as it pertains to my own career, is where the line is between reinvention and challenging yourself and like self-sabotage. It's certainly, if you go in either direction, it can be a bit of a downfall.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, we have enough checks and balances that some sort of self-sabotage is unlikely, but we have moments where we've overstepped, and that's natural. You're going to go down some roads to realize, oh, I don't ever need to go down that road again, or to realize that it opens up a new door. I mean, I think the production on Hard Times from our new album is a bit harsh. Like it sounds harsh to me, and I wouldn't choose that again. But we were working with a producer who liked cold sounds, and he got me into the idea of challenging cold sounds. And we were also going in the moment with, song we wrote in sound check while we were in the middle of recording that album. And, Luke taking a Linn drum and running it through an amplifier and us miking it and just kind of distorting it and blaring it out, and just, you have to go with the flow and you can reflect later. But in that moment, we created a kind of harsh, dirty song that sounded nothing like Guster's ever sounded like before. And so we made a beautiful little acoustic version to go with it.
So forgive my production ignorance, but when you say cold sound, you mean just like being like the antithesis of something that's warm? What is it?
Yeah. So, for instance, we always leaned on acoustic guitars and like a Mellotron flute sound or something that's vintage and Beatlesy, and that was always good.
Something like full and
yeah, and it would sound like a warm cocoon of vinyl. Yeah. And for many albums, that satisfied us. And Leo Abrams, who we worked with, was more inspired by sounds that challenged him, and so he found a certain keyboard that had these kind of Janet Jackson floppy disks that were like just really kind of abrasive keyboards. But when you put it together with our songs and then you kind of move back and forth between the worlds, suddenly the whole sound of the piece you've created is more dynamic and more engaging. And for the most part on the album Look Alive, it's a big success. Yeah, I mean, the cold sounds you could compare to like the way Hard Times sounds like Depeche Mode or Nine Inch Nails or something.
Not quite industrial, but sort of approaching that sort of idea.
Sure, yeah. Some challenging keyboard sounds are all over the record.
Something I'm sure that you get asked a lot in terms of longevity is, really just having the same core group of people. There's some very clear immediate upsides to working with the same people, but, the one thing that springs to mind as being a potential downside is maybe not having as much opportunity to kind of inject new lifeblood into it. But it sounds like what you're getting at in a way is a producer is kind of an opportunity to do that, right? I mean, it's almost having like a rotating additional band member.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We treat the producer choice seriously, and we find someone who's going to complement us. And that's what we did with Leo, and before that, Richard Swift, who was someone who's passed away now, but we really wanted his sound and his perspective. He's like a musical encyclopedia, but they're a very different type of producers. So every Guster album sounds completely different because we're, collaborating with a producer who comes from a different angle. But for the most part, as far as writing songs go, we wrote 4 albums, just me and Ryan and Adam. And then Joe is in the band. So we wrote Gangin' Up on the Sun and Easy Wonderful with Joe, and he took us in all these new places. And then we've written 2 albums since Joe left the band with Luke, and Luke is making a huge impression on what we write. He plays differently, he has different influences and throws out melodies as well and contributes to lyrics and is a huge part of it. So having the 4th Guster be someone that's exciting and fresh really helps evolve our sound too.
Do you think it's the possibility still there of doing another drastic teardown in the same way? When you're first starting a band, everything happens really quickly. I mean, it's just like life in general. It's like being in your 20s. All that happens. But oh my God, it's been nearly 20 years at this point. But you feel like there's been enough. You guys have been able to keep things fresh enough that you don't need to necessarily take such a drastic step.
I feel like every album since Keep It Together has felt like that to us. I mean, there's probably many, many places to push ourselves, and we probably will. Every album since 2003 has kind of landed on our fans with a bit of a shell shock, and now they should be prepared for it. But we don't feel any allegiance to any certain sound. Only the one rule that melody is really necessary and is kind of the king of our songwriting. Sonically, though, we're always looking for new places to go, and there will be more teardowns. Sorry, fans.
It seems like you guys are, and perhaps again, this is another nice byproduct of having worked together for so long, that you don't have to make necessarily a concerted effort in that same way in order to do something drastically different. That when 3 or 4 years elapses between albums and you guys come together, somehow by nature of what you are as a band, things are going to be dramatically different.
Yeah. For some reason, we get together and we've all been listening to different music, whether it's new or old. Nobody just wants to repeat themselves.
Yeah.
So we end up going in new directions and pushing ourselves in different directions. And yeah, hopefully we'll start writing in the next few months and see what comes of it.
I guess that's sort of the ideal that you want out of a really close friend, is somebody who you're comfortable around, but at the same time is completely willing to call you on your bullshit.
Yeah, that's a good direction for this conversation to go, which is that the relationships between the band members have a tremendous amount to do with the music that you create and how free you feel in the room. And if you're playing and you're worried that the leader of the band is going to micromanage you and say, you can't do this, you can do that, but you can't do this, you're not going to uncover new territory the same way you would if you were feeling completely free and liberated and able to express every idea, good and bad. And with our band, we have a pretty good understanding of that, and we give each other space. And then we edit it and we refine each other and we pull each other in as necessary. We can get high and jam and go really, really bizarre places together. I mean, really bizarre. Our new album has a guy rapping in an English accent on it. I mean, we can go further than that even.
Is that actually like a byproduct of a high idea in that way?
I think that was sober.
Okay.
It was a sober decision. I mean,
it does sound like if you told me that was something you guys were like stoned Dr. Gordon's, you're like, you know what this needs? Guy rapping on English accent. I would 100% believe you.
I mean, we were playing that verse beat with those chords, and I think Luke was rapping in like a really like thick English accent, and then Ryan refined it into something that had a subtle melody and was more like a Madness song. And when it came time to record it, we had to look in the mirror and think, are we going to actually do this in a fake British accent? Are we allowed to? What are the rules? Unfortunately, we had a British producer who said, yeah, you can do that. Coached every inflection of every word. And I don't know. What are the rules on fake accents?
I think you're like in a nice place now where you have that kind of freedom, where you can put something on record. You can have an idea, you can put it on record, and if it doesn't work, you scrap it. It's not necessarily the end of the world, but it sounds like part of changing radically from album to album is opening yourself up to those possibilities.
Yeah, I think so. I think there was one like message that came in. We read a lot of our social media. It was like, I love you guys. Most bands would have recorded that song overexcited and made it their hidden track, but you guys just threw it right in the middle of your album. And I was like, what? Most bands would have hidden that song? It was always my instinct to feature it.
I talked to a lot of bands, and some will tell me that the secret to their longevity is almost running things like a dictatorship, from the standpoint of like having somebody who is like, they're very clearly the leader and whatever that entails. At least from the outside, it doesn't seem like you guys necessarily have taken that approach. Maybe everybody has relatively defined roles, but it almost seems like a collective in some ways.
You were a democracy, and there's not a lot of us, especially not coming into their 28th year, who are a surviving democracy. Our relationships have evolved, and our communication has gotten better, and we've matured as people. So I also feel like as a band, we've done our 10,000 hours, which is to say, like, we know each other. We know if we set the conditions correctly, we'll get in a room and music will come out of us and some good ideas will be there and we'll find them.
Yeah.
Like whether it's Adam playing the role of archivist who's like, hey guys, a year ago in our jam, I knew we had this one idea that we'd looked over and here it is. I just found it. And then we'll bring it back up and be like, oh, right. That was good. Everyone plays a role in getting the music over the finish line. And so we're a democracy. Nobody's vote is stronger than anyone else's, but the most important thing is when someone feels strongly about something, you listen to them. You try to hear what they're saying. Even if you don't agree, you at least validate it. And we're 45 years old right now. And the days when we would fire off an angry email based on ego or something like that are behind us. We're approaching a more mature place. And this is where bands get complacent normally, you know? Because it's that ego that drives greatness often. But I personally think that we're more free in the room because we like each other and the relationships are strong.
I mean, I have to imagine like one of the tough things about having done so many interviews for so long and having been a band together is being asked to like put some of these things underneath a microscope, where it's like, if things are working, you don't necessarily want to over-examine them.
Right. Well, for me, I spent a lot of the interviews wishing I was answering the questions and watching Ryan answer them in ways that I wouldn't. It's refreshing and awesome. And I'm going to start a podcast based on the last 20 minutes. But I don't know. Yeah, we don't over-examine them as a band. It was a revelation for me to realize in the last writing process. You know, I go in every time, I'm like, well, maybe this is the time when the ideas don't come. And maybe this will be the time it dries up. Because we've had a great run, and I think we've made solid album after solid album since 1999. And I don't want to jinx anything, but then I actually like think about it, and I do think that the relationships have a lot to do with us wanting to go in there and wanting to create together and wanting to do the hard work and wanting to listen to each other and, and wanting to keep Guster going. So for now, it's still strong. And, I feel like we're leaving a legacy of music that we'll be proud of.
I like friends who you've known for a really long time. Even though you feel like you know them really well, it still boggles your mind trying to figure out how their brain operates. And it sounds like that's a case of that, this idea of being like an archivist of, that you guys could have played together in a room and he can just pull one idea. And that's, I think, one of the things that can make it a functioning democracy is everybody brings distinctly different skills to the table.
Yeah, and everyone's roles have evolved. So if I'm going through some old jam session, maybe I'm just looking for a way to contribute when I feel like I wanted to contribute more last time, or whatever it is. It's just the way the equilibrium of Guster happens.
When you're having these conversations and it's like, all right, well, we're approaching like year 3 or 4 since the last record. You guys are spread out. You're here in New York, and you guys are as a band from Somerville, Massachusetts area originally.
Yeah, but we're all spread out. We're in different states.
Yeah, that's got to be a whole process, right?
Yeah. And it's not like 3 years have gone by. It's usually 1 year of touring, and then we start writing. Yeah. But the writing takes a year or two because we only get together a couple days a month, or, before this show or that show, we'll do a day. And writing songs takes a long time for us. It's not like we wrote 40 songs and we'll put the best 10 on there. It's like, no, we wrote 12 and we worked really hard on them.
But it sounds like you can apply the we to all the songs generally. I mean, it's not really a case of somebody coming in and being like, all right, here it is, everybody, you play your part.
Yeah. No, we sweat it out in a room. And the melodies come, and if someone takes the idea home and furthers it along, that's great. It doesn't always happen that way. It's often the genesis and the rest of it is in the room, except for lyrics, which we do on emails between me and Ryan, right before we sing them. This time they're all Ryan lyrics, and we go back and forth and just do some checks and balances. And that's the hardest part. It's really hard to put lyrics on a song you may have written a year and a half ago, because generally whatever comes out of your mouth the moment you think of the melody is what sticks to it. And if you replace that, you're going to feel forced and contrived. And so often right before we sing the lyrics, we get into a bit of a lyrical place.
That's got to be the most nerve-wracking part of the process. I mean, that must be pretty
commitment.
Stressful. But isn't that the part of the process where it feels like, getting back to this idea of maybe this is the time when things won't come, like when you're like, oh shit, we got to be in this studio recording this right now. That's got to be a time when it's most nerve-wracking.
I mean, that's just classic procrastination.
Sure. I mean, it's worked, obviously.
It's worked well enough, yeah. But we're not going to have the lyrics wrapped up and tidy and in a package in advance. We're not going to do the hard work until the deadline is there. It's just fact. And so, but even being in the studio, recording Look Alive, the song, my favorite lyric is the bridge. The hero enters the frame. He's memorized his lines. Hollow words from the front of the stage echo for miles and miles. Literally wrote that while singing the vocal, because we had just added a bridge a few days earlier, and then we needed lyrics for it. And it just came in the moment. Your brain is more focused. It's crunch time. It's like your brain's ready to receive. And so it does work like that.
As listeners, generally, the lyrics are like the first thing to hit you. They're the things that are kind of, in a way, most easy to absorb because they're tangible. When you've been batting a song around for, a year at this point, and then the lyrics are coming last minute, does that or can that radically alter the song or your relationship to the song?
Yeah. It's hard because you get stuck in a groove. You're attached to this fake lyric that existed on it, but
you're attached to almost like the feeling of the words and not the meaning.
Yeah, and often that lyric that comes at the moment of Genesis is what sticks on the album. Don't go. That just came out of our mouths. Yeah. And then we had to figure out a way to make that less of a lame lyric. Don't go making something out of nothing. And that took a while. But it's hard. It's hard to get your head around it. You're like, oh, well, this doesn't sound as good, but am I just used to the old version? Our history is littered with moments where I insisted on a lyric and now I realize I was wrong. And so on.
I hate to put you on the spot, but are there any you can think of that are just like, I can't believe that I fought for that?
Yeah, our song Hang On, which is one of our best songs. It was Hang On, Suzanne, had the name Suzanne in there. And I like that. And Ryan changed it to Hang On, Hang On. And I thought that was so cheesy, and I was so mad, and I insisted he was making a mistake. And now I think Hang On, Suzanne is cheesy, so...
There's a little Leonard Cohen in there, it sounds like, right?
It's pretty Leonard Cohen-y melody too. Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons why that name came out there. It was more of a band melody, but yeah.
It's impossible to completely divorce yourself of your influences, but you don't want it to, like, in hindsight, feel like a pretty straight lift.
Yeah, like, for instance, Overexcited sounds like it was, influenced by Our House by Madness. And sure, we loved that song and probably had it in mind, but it's more a spirit that's similar between the two. It's not a melody or a chord progression or a groove or anything that's lifted. It's just kind of got that attitude to it. And that to me is a really healthy way to lift something. We wrote a song called Come On, and after we released it, a lot of people were like, that sounds a lot like this one Jackson Browne song. I don't even remember what the name of it was because none of us have ever listened to Jackson Browne. So we're like, well, that's just a coincidence.
Yeah. It's funny the way, as we get older, the way we return to certain pieces of music. I do very much have a soft spot in my heart for like Madness and all of those two-tone ska bands, but it's not necessarily something that it would have, maybe occurred to you like, 30 or 40 years ago, however long that was, that was something that in 2017, 2018, 2019 that like would continue to influence what you were doing.
But it's so worthy.
Yeah. It's an all-timer for sure.
Sure. And remains to be seen how history will treat our music or any of the music that we're hearing today. But if it sticks with you, it's got value. I mean, we just unearthed this song from the 70s by this artist named Labi Siffre, and we're going to release a version of it. We've been covering it lately. I can't believe how good the song is. It's got a title that no one can remember called like Crying, Loving, Living, Laughing, or maybe not in that order.
All of those words are involved in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, there's just so many songs that didn't really get their moment that are worthy.
That's a cool role to take on. In a way, it's curatorial. Maybe in a sense, being in a band is curatorial generally, in that you're taking all these disparate people and disparate parts and attempting to create a cohesive product out of it. But this is a very direct form of that, of like, hey, here's this really cool song and we want to share it with the people who like our music.
Yeah. I mean, that was, it's kind of just like a sweet discovery that fit well with the way we play our instruments. There are people who, do music licensing and supervising whose job it is to be amazing curators and archivists and to find songs. I mean, I remember when like the Rushmore soundtrack came out and all those Wes Anderson movies came out, that dude Randall Poster, is that his name, Randall Poster? He was finding songs by the Kinks and the Rolling Stones and Van Morrison that you didn't even know and that were incredible, and as in addition to bands that you hadn't heard of.
But also even the ones that you had heard of, and like Wes Anderson's movies are particularly good at this. I think it's something that like Tarantino is really good at too, is like even if you have heard the song, the context is completely different, and it shows you like how important the broader context of a piece of art is when it comes to music.
Yeah. I was really, you can look, what's that song by The Faces? I wish that I knew
Oh,
what I knew. That
La
was
La. Yeah.
La La.
Yeah.
The last scene in Rushmore. I
Yeah.
mean, that song is a major player in that
Mhm.
that movie, and it works so well. And a couple years later, we wrote our song "Jesus on the Radio," which is highly influenced by that
Yeah.
song.
When you're not watching the movie, that song has had a new impact on your life. I don't know, there's like a piece of it you take with you every time you listen to it. There's a piece of that kind of ambiance or the mood or whatever it was that the director was developing that continues to live on beyond the movie itself.
Yeah, well, that's where film and music work so well together. I wish our songs were in more artistic moments of film, but the ones where we have been in movies are fun. We're in the Wedding Crashers scene where one of the guys, either Will Ferrell or who's the other guy?
Oh, not Vince Vaughn.
Owen Wilson.
Yeah.
One of them starts crashing weddings on their own
Yeah.
without the
Yeah,
other
yeah.
one. And that's when they play I Hope Tomorrow Is Like Today by
Yeah.
Guster. And they play our song Rainy Day in the scene where the teenage boy goes down on a guy for money in a BMW. That's good. Take that image with us.
The flip side of that, or not even the flip side, like directly related to that is the idea of like you create this piece of art, obviously like holds this special place to you where you were when you were recording it and all these other things. But you know that once it's on record, it belongs to the world. You can't.
Yeah, I mean, we could say no to the movie or whatever,
Sure.
but we were super psyched. We're always psyched to get our music exposed to more people, and that song actually worked in that context of that scene. But yeah, when you release something in the world, it's a bold thing to do. It's brave. You're going to subject yourself to criticism, and you're going to not control how people react to it or who hears it or any of these things. So, just got to create it, do your best, feel good about it, and set it free.
Do you feel like you have a continued relation to the songs once they're kind of like out in the world?
I don't really listen to them,
Sure.
and we play them live. If I went back to the recordings, I would only scrutinize them. I'd be like, oh, we play this one better live now that we've worked it in. Or I might hear a regrettable production idea. That's what my brain would do.
It's perpetual workshopping, right?
Yeah, it's not a great affliction,
No.
to be honest.
Everybody's probably likely a perfectionist to a certain point. If you love something, set it free.
Yeah, I mean, there are times where I'll hear our song and I'll be like, yeah, crushed it. But more often than not, I'll hear something I would have done differently. And so my editorial brain and my judgmental brain is valuable in the recording process, being a co-producer and always has been. Some people are more inclined to listen critically.
Yeah.
And that's just been my role.
So the album's been out for a few months. There were all of the months leading up to it when it had already been finished and you're waiting for like all of the record label stuff to finish and get it out into the world. So for this latest record, as the most recent example, what is your relationship to those songs right now?
Right now I'm still in a place where I'm extremely proud. It feels really good.
Prolonged honeymoon.
Yeah. And now I'm just like trying to get as many ears on it as possible. Yeah, Overexcited's been on the radio and that's great, but that's kind of like the novelty song in the middle of a pretty serious album.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that people recognize the songs that we wrote and not just, our hardcore fans. I want to get it out on as many ears as possible. So that's why I'm on this podcast today, Brian.
This is something I've like tried to get better at in my life. When somebody compliments me on something and I'm like, that wasn't my best thing. That's not the thing I was most proud of, is trying to get better at like taking a fucking compliment, Where you're at isn't, you're not like, it's not in the same way that you would have been like a one-hit wonder in the 80s, something like that, where they're just like, that's the song. Like, that's the song that I'm going to be famous for the rest of time. You call it a novelty song, but I mean, you're still as proud of it, right?
Yeah, that was overly stated for dramatic effect.
Sure.
There's, it's not a pure novelty song, but relative to the rest of the record, it strikes people that way. Taking a compliment is good. That's part of, you're not as old as I am, but I think you either age in an angry direction or a grateful direction. And I think that's something that everyone needs to work on. It doesn't just come naturally. You actually have to, look within and involve some self-care and have perspective and accept the compliment and be grateful.
At what point in the process is it clear that like that's going to be the song that's played on the radio?
They choose that before the album's even released.
Yeah.
And we went through a few iterations. Hard Times was the first song that was released, but it wasn't a proper single. And the song Terrified has a massive anthemic chorus lyric, and everyone's like, well, that could be a big song, but it doesn't quite work on radio. And then Overexcited was the catchiest of all the songs, so went with that. And I remember telling our producer, yeah, Overexcited's going to be the first single, and he was like, wow, really?
Good place to close, and I think, is to tell me a little bit more about this Partridge Family situation you've got going on.
Oh, right. So on 2 occasions, we have decided to do what is called a family bus, where we rent a second tour bus and fill it with all the children, all the spouses, and a couple of nannies. And for a week or so, go through the country with the children on sleeping in bus bunks, being with us all day. It's a weird violation of what is sacred on the road. It is an interesting thing, and I think the band members all hold their breath until it's over, to be honest. But at the same time, I can look at the photos of it, and I can talk to my kids about it, and they just can't wait. When can we go back on the tour bus? They get to see what we do. They get to have an actual visceral feeling of what it's like to be on the road. There's a lot of reasons why that's great. If waking up at 6 to pour bowls of Cheerios is not ideal, I am grateful that we had them out on the road with us.
This is the Guster version of Take Your Kids to Work Day, basically?
Yeah, totally.
Is it going to happen again, do you think?
We're talking about it this summer.
Yeah.
My daughter's 11 and goes away to camp all summer, and she would be heartbroken to miss out on the family bus. So, life might get in the way, but having the kids at the shows and having the kids hang out with each other is really special.
Are the kids musically inclined at all?
Mine are not. Ukulele lessons here or there. I got one son who's got perfect pitch, which I don't know where he got that from. And I don't know about the other guys. I know Ryan's daughter Leo plays harp, can sing back melodies from obscure records, so she seems pretty musical. For me, the lesson is you come to your instrument, you come to music yourself. You don't come to it because you were forced to play a lesson. That's always the wrong way to find joy in music. So if one day they discover it, the instruments are there, that'll be great. It'll be a great benefit to their lives, but I'm not gonna push it on them.
There you go. That was Brian Rosenworcel of Guster. The last time we spoke was actually the full band and in a very loud and crowded bar, the sadly now defunct Grassroots in Manhattan. Glad we had an opportunity to catch up in a far more quiet setting. Guster's new record, Look Alive, is out now. Thanks so much to Brian. Thanks to you guys, as always, for listening to the program. If you like the show, there are a number of ways to support us. You can rate and review us on iTunes. We're on Google Podcasts and Spotify now. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Tumblr. That's rwellcast.tumblr.com. If you have any feedback, it's rwellcast@gmail.com. And that's about all we got for now, so stick around because we're going to be back real soon with another episode of RIYL.